a harmonious salutation to you. Let's keep reading the Archeometer, and today I'm gonna keep reading the background of Saint-Yves, because some people asked for it. So let's see how that goes, and then probably on the next one, we are going to already start the book itself. We're going to read the preface today, at least. So, without further ado, let's go to my screen, and let's start. So, Saint-Yves D'Alveydre, and I'm gonna butcher a lot of names, just so you know. The Missions Revealer. So Joseph Alexander Saint-Yves was born on March 26th, 1842 in Paris, son of Guilherme Alexander, a 36-year-old physician, and Marie Josephine Amoureux, slightly over 18-year-old. At 1 o'clock in the morning, at the family residence located at number 23 on Rue Lequiware or whatever, a few meters from the Church of Saint Denis. This was very interesting because I realized that we have enough information to do his astrological map. I'm not going to go super deep into it, but as you can see, there's some cool stuff to see here. If this one is the tropical one. So we have here Sun in Aries, Pioneer, okay, so almost at the beginning here. Moon in Virgo and making opposition, so that's very interesting to see. His Mercury in Pisces, also nice. A very high concentration of fire, with Sagittarius being the ascendant as well. So a lot of cool stuff to check. Again, I'm not going to go super deep, even because I cannot really confirm that this is really the case. It could be there are some information that are not so great, but that's a very cool thing. Now, let's continue. His childhood was unhappy, marked by violent conflicts with paternal authority, considered an untamable rebel. He would later describe himself in adulthood. At school, I had the sad honor of being among the insubordinate, the most insufferable. Now again, why is it important to read all of this? First of all, so you can reflect yourself into how his life shaped the person he became. So you can see to yourself how your life is shaping you, and if you want to be shaped in that way or not, right? You're going to see how that plays out. But also to understand where he's coming from. Why all of this? Why does it make sense or not, and so on. Okay, what's the context? Wary of his eccentricities, his parents enrolled him at age 13 in the Metrai colony, a reformatory school in Indre-et-Loire, near Thiers. It had been founded by a councillor of the court of first instance of Paris, Frederick Auguste de Metz, who, from 1839 onward, had resigned from his official duties to devote himself to juvenile delinquents. His pedagogical method was based on the intention to reform troubled youths through a life of work in the countryside, in a setting that included a chateau. He defined his institution as a paternal society for the moral, agricultural, and professional education of young detainees under the age of 16, acquitted under Article 66 of the Penal Code for having acted without discernment. So as you can see, he's quite a troublesome boy. Makes sense given his Sun in Aries. This initiative attracted the attention of many prominent figures in French society. The Count of Gasperin, the banker François de Lessert, the Duc de Caisse, Rambuteau, and others. Run by de Metz and Herman de Courtelis, the institution, which spanned 1906 actresses by 1855, took in youths from both wealthy and poor backgrounds. De Metz so effectively bonded with Saint-Yves and educated him that Saint-Yves developed great admiration for him and considered him his spiritual father. So this guy was very important in his life. That phase of Saint-Yves' life lasted 2 years, after which he studied with the priest of Ingrandes, Abbé Rousseau, before returning to his paternal home. His relationship with his father did not improve during his absence, and his father forced him to enlist in the Marine Infantry. An intervention by the Mets made the father consent for Saint-Yves to continue his studies at the Naval Medical School of Brest. So again, as you can see, imagine yourself in this situation. You are here, you are like a super rebel, your father puts you in this colony. You could see this as like a super problematic thing. But in this place was where he met a greater guy, the Mets, which he then considered to be his spiritual father, which then led him to help him get out of the Marine Infantry. So again, not everything that happens in your life is totally bad, nor totally good. It's just cause and effect. And you are the creator of the cause. For reasons that remain unclear, after 3 years of study at the age of 22, very emblematic, he left the medical school and decided to settle among the political exiles of the Second Empire on the island of Jersey, probably to have the opportunity to associate with his great idol, Victor Hugo. Saint-Yves would remain a fervent Hugo supporter until the end of his life. In that environment, he met another Hugo devotee, Adolphe Pilaporte, and frequently visited the homes of Auguste de Molin and Luc de Sage, sons-in-law of Pierre Leroux. Local society provided him other connections that would prove important for his future studies. Pilaporte's grandmother, Virginie Faure, highly cultured, had been associated with the occultist Fabre d'Olivet, who was often mentioned by the Mets to his disciple Saint-Yves. There, Saint-Yves had the opportunity to study under Fabre d'Olivet directly at a reliable source, gaining exposure to his entire body of work, as well as to classic authors, forming a cultural foundation that would prove very useful to him later. So this guy also has some very nice stuff. With the outbreak of the War of 1870, Saint-Yves returned to France and witnessed the Paris Commune, which made a profound impact on him and led him to reflect on political and social matters, marking the beginning of his ambition to discover a political formula capable of curbing violence in social relations. Again, only because he lived the life that he lived that he was interested in this kind of stuff. Okay, and he had the connections to make like important actions towards this. Because if his life was different, let's say if his context was different, if he wasn't born in France, maybe he wouldn't see all the transformation and it wouldn't trigger on him these kind of things. So that's why where you were born on and all the context that you were born with matters a lot to the opportunities that you have. However, his projects lay dormant for a time, as Saint-Yves had to accept modest employment at the Ministry of the Interior to earn his living. Marriage. Poor and solitary, having authored a few pamphlets that went unnoticed, he even considered becoming a Trappist monk. Fate, however, led him in a different direction. During a soirée, one of the rare social gatherings he attended, held by Paul Lacroix at the Arsenal Library, he met Marie Victoire de Risnich, who in 1876 had divorced Count Edward Fyodorovich Keller, a senator and private counselor to the Russian Tsar. The wealthy countess, then 50 years old, and Saint-Yves, 36, discovered shared personal interests and a common love for studies in occultism and hermetic sciences. He had the Hermetic Risk. They fell in love and were married in 1877 in a discreet ceremony in Westminster, England. By the way, let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier for you to read. I think this is nice. After unsuccessful industrial ventures that resulted in heavy financial losses, The couple acquired in 1880 Italian lands associated with the Marquisate of Alveydre. By this transaction, the noble title Marquis d'Alveydre was bestowed upon the commoner husband of Mary Victory. Thanks to his wife's wealth and his newfound financial independence, Saint-Yves devoted himself exclusively to occult studies and to his attempt at formulating synarchy. If I'm not mistaken, Jung had a similar thing where his wife helped him a lot with the, let's say, wealth part while he was doing these studies. So again, you gotta ask yourself, depending on what you have to do in life or what you want to do in life, you're not necessarily gonna have to worry about certain things. If he was someone worried about getting riches, he would never do the work that he did. Doesn't make sense. Okay, you gotta choose the stuff you want to do. Developing his psychic gifts, Saint-Yves, assisted by his secretary, Louis Cabral, began to dictate his works in a kind of continuous trance, known as the missions. In 1882, he published Mission des Soufiens par l'Undo, or whatever. I'm always butchering the French stuff. In 12 chapters, corresponding to the 12 signs of the zodiac. It was an essay in which he presents himself as a Machiavelli, who had written a new book of state, the Machiavellianism of light. Jesus. The sovereignty he spoke of was a sacerdotal sovereignty, just as he considered himself a sovereign, stating, "Even though I do not have Jewish blood in my veins, I take my place among the Jews. I address their Talmudic scholars, their Kabbalists. Mission des Ouvriers, Mission des Juifs, which is Jews, and La France Vraie, in 22 volumes based on the major arcana of the tarot, rounded out his theory, which he then presented in a series of lectures across Europe, proclaiming the need for a European synarchic amphictyony. It's like a group of people. His occult politics separated authority from power, and power, imperium in the Roman sense, from the popular will. So it's a triad thing, making it an expression of a synthesis of knowledge through the reconciliation of Judeo-Christian science and religion, and through rapprochement between religious and civil teaching bodies. Far from exalting enlightened despotism, his system limited personal powers and subordinated them to the formula: to reign is to serve. Again, if you keep blocking yourself from learning certain stuff just because of their background, that's your problem. So in this book, he's going to rely a lot on Judeo-Christian namings. But you gotta remember, those are just names, right? If you prefer other names, that's fine. Just learn what you can and remove that doesn't make sense to you. Just putting this as a side note. However, the publication of Mission des Juifs caused him a series of problems. So closely aligned were his ideas with those of Fabre d'Olivet, the guy that he studied, that Saint-Yves was accused of plagiarism, though the works differed but followed a similar line of reasoning. In the July 7, 1885 edition of Le Rappel, one Victor Meunier, also editor of the journal Cosmos, accused him of plagiarizing Fabre d'Olivet works. Histoire philosophique du genre humain, la langue hébraïque restituée, and les sphères d'or de Pythagore. That's me trying to learn French. By the way, well, let's finish here. Saint-Yves defended himself feebly and was deeply shaken by the publication in 1886 of a novel on the matter, Monsieur le Marquis, Histoire d'un Prophète, signed by one Clary Valtier de l'Alpre, a pseudonym used most likely by the renowned astronomer and scientist Camille Flammarion. Now, keep in mind, everything in the simulator is copies and plagiarism. It's not a shame. Obviously, if you just copy stuff without making anything else and you try to use that to your advantage, then that's a shame on you, right? Because you're trying to be something which is not. But there's no such thing as a total original work. You're always getting inspiration from something else. You're always just playing stuff and replaying stuff in the simulator. There's nothing new under the sun. His prestige among occultists suffered. Oswald Wirth, secretary and biographer of Stanislas de Guaita, a renowned occultist of the time, wrote that de Guaita felt a cruel disappointment when the author of Mission des Juifs was unmasked as a plagiarist of Fabre de Livet. Not wanting to join the chorus when Saint-Yves' adversaries, de Guaita kept silent, but could not avoid maliciously confiding that, after all, everything good in Saint-Yves comes from Fabre de Livet, and the rest is Saint-Yves' own doing. An observation as cruel as any enemy's. Since, in the opinion of other prestigious occultists, the work of the Marquis d'Alveydre was truly unique. So again, it's up to you to understand or not, whatever. The point here is for us to get the information. It is possible that Saint-Yves' contemporaries were overly harsh in their judgments, for he was a continuator of Fabre de Livet ideas, and the body of his work was highly original compared to the occult studies of the mystery schools of that time. On the contrary, one might say that even Madame Blavatsky and other theosophists drew upon Saint-Yves D'Alveydre bodies of work to formulate their doctrine. Hence, considering him a successor to Fabre de Livet, Saint-Yves, following in his mentor's footsteps, rewrote human history based on myths and etymologies. While eminent historians focused on Europe's Greco-Roman legacy, Saint-Yves underscored the dual Celtic-Druidic and Judeo-Christian influence on European civilization. The cycle of the ram and the lamb, in which the ram, I think this is because of the translation, that's why there's here 2 times, is also referred to as the lamb, that is, Christ. He further notes the name of Western Europe was Fahara, and that of the East was Kouru, or however you pronounce those, illustrating this point by citing place names of regions and cities such as Varsava, and by the word war itself, signifying the uprising of Fahara. In India, the ram represents the vehicle of Agni. And again, when we come back to it, it's all astro-theological stories. It's always on the stars. That's it. And we anthropomorphize the stuff. We just put a human face to it. Aware of the importance of his work, he did not let this encouragement keep him from writing further. In the following years, he published several books, brochures, and patriotic poems to illustrate his synarchic system. Some of the ideas Saint-Yves advocated, as noted earlier, were later embraced by the Theosophical movement, even prior to the appearance of Blavatsky Isis segment in 1887. Concerning the existence of Mahatmas or Masters of Wisdom, invisible beings usually dwelling in the remote areas of Tibet, belonging to the Great White Lodge, from which they secretly guided the world's destinies. This was greatly supported by Lady Caithness, Duchess of Pomar, editor of the journal Aurora, where Abbe Rocca, a fervent follower of Saint-Yves D'Alveydre, published articles. The Duchess of Pomar gained fame in Parisian society for the lectures she organized at her chateau on Rue Wagram, attended by spiritualists from diverse strings of thought. In 1887, the Marquis d'Alveydre met Prince Hardi Sharif from Bombay, a mysterious figure who claimed to be a Brahman Guru Pandit. It was Sharif who conveyed knowledge to Saint-Yves that led him to write Mission de l'Inde in Europe. So, Mission of the Indians, or Mission of India in Europe. Regretting having written it, or perhaps warned by the masters who had shared their revelations, Saint-Yves destroyed nearly the entire edition of that work. Fearful people would say to him, "This man is mad, a victim of mystification, or a mystifier." The only copy he saved ended up in the possession of his son-in-law, Alexis Keller, after his death. Keller later gave it to the Society of Friends of Saint-Yves, headed by Dr. Gerard Nicaus, which is Papoose, also known as Papoose, who republished it in 1910. Added to that edition was the remark: "It is Saint-Yves' first work in which the practical experiences of out-of-body travel allowed the author to enter the most secret sanctuaries on earth to verify oral teachings. These sanctuaries were located in Agartha, the lost city." Now, let me point out something here. You can read as many books as you want. You can have lessons from as many people as you want. At some point, you gotta verify the teachings. And you can only do it, considering you have a limited body, a sarcophagus, you can only do it when you realize that you have more bodies that are less limited. We can call it out-of-body experience or whatever. But only on those you can really verify stuff that otherwise you're just going to outsource to someone else to teach it to you. It was Sharif who revealed to Saint-Yves the secret of a supreme authority in the world, organized in a synarchic manner and led by three pontiffs, Prahatma, Mahatma, and Mahanga. Saint-Yves also feared reprisals from these pontiffs if he were to publish the work. Of note was his warning to Westerns contained in the text. "If you do not establish synarchy, I foresee a century from now," so this was more or less now, right? So this was the end of the 1800s, so yeah, more or less the time we are right now. "Your Judeo-Christian civilization forever eclipsed, your brutal supremacy definitely tamed by an incredible resurgence of all Asia, resurrected, risen, confident, fully armed, and fulfilling. Without you and even against you, the social promise of the Abrahamites, of Moses, of Jesus Christ, and of all of the Judeo-Christian Kabbalists." Coincidence or not, more than 100 years after that prediction, China, India, Pakistan, and North Korea possesses a feared and threatening atomic arsenal. Yeah, you can see the power shifting, but it's like, again, it's always algorithms, it's always goes in and out and it changes, it doesn't really matter. If you are stuck to a place you, again, didn't understand that you are not from this world, it doesn't matter where you're from, literally. You're not from here. The body, you're renting it, okay? So don't get too attached. Financial decline. In 1890, the Marquis d'Alveydre published Mission des Souverains, an epic poem dedicated to the French army, followed by Jeanne d'Arc victorieuse. By that time, his wife's fortune had begun to wane, and they moved to Versailles to live more modestly in her small mansion at 9 Rue Colbert. A heavy blow befell Saint-Yves when he lost his beloved wife, whom he had called Angel of My Life, from the moment they first met. She was 68 years old when she passed away on June 7, 1895. Her bedroom, as previously noted, became a funeral chamber that Saint-Yves frequently visited to honor her memory and receive her inspirations. In 1894, 80 years after he had destroyed Mission de l'Inde, Saint-Yves' biography records the visit of another Oriental figure, perhaps more powerful than the first. He did not reveal his identity and did not receive much attention from the occultist, who by then was consumed with all producing his grandest work, even more significant than the Snarkic system, which he called the Archeometer, which is what we are studying here. A concrete synthesis of all human knowledge. Within the Archeometer, according to the author, lies the synthesis of humankind's religious, scientific, and aesthetic possibilities. Just reading this, I got some real surge of energy. That was nice. And some goosebumps. The Archeometer. Okay, so this is what we are really studying here. Just gave you some context of who's the guy behind it, which is Saint-Yves. But let's go. Here, the Archeometer. Which, by the way, there's an image I didn't show correctly on the last one, but here it is. You can see, we're gonna still see the description of it, but it correlates, for example, this color to this astrological symbol, which is in this case Capricorn, to this planet, so I'm pretty sure this is Saturn, to this musical note, to this Hebrew letter, so the Shin, and so on. This I'm pretty sure it's no, it's not Sanskrit. Sanskrit one is somewhere around here, but anyways, then you can see all the correlations. Okay, there are layers upon layers. We're gonna study them all. So the Archeometer was not only Saint-Yves D'Alveydre's dream. In 1275, Raymond Lull wrote Ars Magna, in which he expounded his Ars Generalis, or Ars Magna, a combinatory method for logical deduction and demonstration of all knowledge. His work had a strong influence on Leibniz, Nicholas of Cusa, and Giordano Bruno. Athanasius Kircher, a lover of all things Egyptian, was considered an erudite Kabbalist and Hermeticist who strived for a synthesis between Kabbalism and Hermeticism, which is Tarot and the Torah. Okay, so you combine both, which the Egyptians already had. The 14 parts of Osiris, 7 plus 7, 7 laws of Noah, 7 laws of the Kybalion. Okay, in his study of the Kabbalah in Oedipus Aegyptiacus, in the chapter The Allegorica Hieroglyphic Paraltheia, Kircher attempts to blend all mystical traditions. In this regard, he is a Pico della Mirandola of the 17th century, though his synthesis includes sources unknown to Mirandola, such as Mexico and Japan, visited by Jesuit missions. Now, what I call Kabbalah, which is not written like this, is this synthesis, which the Archeometer has a really close approximation. So that's really cool. It's, again, not something new, not something that only this guy wanted to do. And that's why you shouldn't fix yourself into just one school of thought, because you lose information. You gotta create bridges between all of them. Pico della Mirandola traveled to Rome in 1494 with his 900 theses or questions derived from every philosophy, proposing that they could all be reconciled with each other. Francisco Sanchez, who claimed to have discovered the root of all languages, built his Speculum Archetypum, allegedly able to provide the meaning of every imaginable word and the key to all musical systems. The word archeometer comes from Greek, meaning the measure of the archeo. Then we have tarot arcanas, right? Archaeology, and so on. Archetypes. You see the ark of Noah, I guess. Yeah, Noah's Ark, which Hermeticists speak of Saint-Yves. However, preferred to explain... Wait, sorry, let me do this again. The word archeometer comes from Greek, meaning the measure of the archeo, which Hermeticists speak of. Saint-Yves, however, preferred to explain the term as coming from the Sanskrit arca matra. Arca is the sun, the central emblem of the divine seal, where R is the radiant wheel of the divine word, and Ka is the primordial matter, while Matra is the mother measure par excellence, that of the principle. It also signifies the metric sign of the divine gift, of substance in all the proportional degrees of its equivalences. The universal knowledge of the Archeometer constitutes the foundation of all religions and sciences, uniting the spirit, the soul, and the body of truth, demonstrating, through observation and experience, the unity of its universality in its threefold social state: economic, juridical, and academic spheres. The Archeometer itself is a circle of 360 degrees divided into concentric zones with movable triangles, forming 12 sections of 30 degrees each, where Hebrew, Arabic, Sanskrit letters, as well as a mysterious primordial language, which is the Vatan, appear alongside zodiacal and planetary signs, colors, and musical notes, creating an indefinite number of harmonic combinations, which is, like I showed you, this thing right here. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of layers, connects colors to symbols to a lot of stuff. This instrument of universal correspondence spans all domains of human knowledge and is the key to every initiatic tradition. It enables, for example, architects to derive forms from a name, a color, or an idea, poets to establish relations between letters and colors, expressing the perfect ideal of humanity. Saint-Yves clarifies the relationships between letters and colors, intuited by Rimbaud and his imitators, are scientifically determined by the Archeometer. He emphasizes that the Archeometer aligns all measures with current metric units, the meter and the circle, that is 103 millimeters and 360 degrees. In summary, the Archeometer can be described as follows: a double circle of 360 degrees, rotating in opposite directions, such that 3 represents the word, verb, I'll correct this afterwards, 6 represents the Holy Spirit, and 360 represents the defined universe. A zodiac of 12 gates, the modal letters, measured at 30 degrees each. Every gate contains its morphological letter and the traditional number of that letter within a frame of the corresponding archeometric color. A movable zone, called the planetary of letters, consisting of 12 angles, 4 equilateral triangles, 12 letters, 12 numbers, 12 colors, and 12 notes. The triangle formed by the letters Isho is the triangle of the word, Ifo, which is this stuff right here, right, that we were seeing, with triangles and so on. Okay? Let's go back. A fixed pink zodiacal band with the 12 signs derived from the 12 zodiacal letters. A bluish planetary astral band in motion containing its 7 diatonic astral signs, 5 are excluded. Note that the archeometric astrology has its own characteristics and differences in astrological domiciles. Similarly, the values of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet do not coincide with the constructive, evolutionary, and involutionary letters of the Archeometer, since Saint-Yves drew on a knowledge older than the Jewish tradition. Again, it's like common for us humans to try and create logic all of stuff. But if this is a simulator, meaning it was programmed, the programming can change. So if you're going to study the tarot and you start by the Fool because people said so, that's one way. But you can also start by the Magician. You can also start by the High Priestess, and so on and so on. You just gotta make sure that that works out for you. Just like you can use tropical astrology to read someone, or sidereal astrology. Just like you could call Aries Aries, or you could call Aries something else, and so on and so forth. just like the colors are perceived by humans, but some other beings or even humans from themselves see stuff differently. Okay, it's not an exact science, despite the tentatives. And it's something that evolves with time. Same with the tree of life. A small area composed of 12 angles formed by 4 intersecting equilateral triangles beneath the metrological generating triangle. A central circle, solar center, containing a musical pentagram with one note, Mi, at the common center. A resurgent Adamic letter in the shape of a semicircle, 5 lines and 12 white rays, forming 6 diameters spaced 30 degrees apart around the circle. So 30 degrees times 12, 360 degrees. The author's aim in creating the Archeometer is thus to inscribe the measure of the word in a physical instrument that, according to Pappus, is precisely what the ancients used to establish all esoteric religious myths. It is the canon of ancient art in its various architectural, musical, poetic, and theogonic expressions. This is how you start to understand how there are 4 levels to everything you read. If you just read what's literally there, could be in your favorite book, in your sacred book, whatever, you're going to get just a small part of the understanding. The real understanding, it's what's behind the stuff. It's what's behind the stuff. So again, the code behind it. We are going to get deeper into it on the book, but that's what you have to understand. The passing. On June 26, 1903, Saint-Yves D'Alveydre obtained a patent for his invention of the Archeometer, explaining how to use it to determine the musical structure of a cathedral or the speaking architecture of a chant. This first version already contained an introduction recounting the history of the formation of humankind. When he died at noon on February 6, 1909, in Pau, France, where he had gone for a medical treatment, research on the Archeometer ceased. His body was taken to Versailles and buried next to that of the Marquise D'Alveydre in the Notre Dame cemetery. The tomb was built using measurements derived from the Archeometer and was surrounded by beautiful trees, enclosing a 6-pointed cross adorned with Hebrew letters, which is no longer there because it broke. Did this accident echo the dreams of St. Yves and break just as his ideas did? Only time will tell if humanity will one day adopt synarchy, a new social order, and employ the Archeometer, the canon of ancient art, in its various architectural, musical, political, and theogonic manifestations. Barlet, St. Yves' biographer and Grand Master of the Rosicrucian order, and a Kabbalist, said upon his passing, St. Yves will always be with us to inspire and guide us. He then added, speaking to those who hold table-turning seances, this is not an allusion to spiritist methods of communicating with the souls of the departed, but rather a mental presence. I have even the most serious reasons, and therefore the duty, to affirm that the soul of St. Yves rests in peace, in a region inaccessible to us, and that any attempt to evoke his soul, through profanation according to his own theories, would have above all the effect of dangerously disturbing the evoker. So all of this part that we read until now, so from this video and the last one, was written by this guy, Eduardo Carvalho Monteiro, from the Madras Editora. I'm not going to include this stuff on the last version of the translation, obviously, because I don't have the rights to publish those guys. But since you guys were interested, we read it together. And there's a bunch of sources from everything that he wrote so far. I got the original names here. So let's quickly go through the foreword before we finish this video, which is already quite long. Book 1, Introduction to the Study of the Archeometer. The Archeometer, its objective reconstitution, solstice and equinoxes of the word of the verb. Archeometry compared religions in the incomparable. Brahmanism inversion of Esoterism. The protest of Foe, Zoroaster of Proto-Buddhism, Gaina. The Ionism of the Sobras and Mohammedanism. We are going to understand all of this when we read it. Foreword. It has been only 2 years since our venerable master departed from the visible world, passing through the gate of souls to unite eternally with the divine word. The angelic soul who was always, though invisible, his support in this earthly life. The disappearance of this luminous genius has brought forth many disciples from all corners, which would be a source of joy were it not that some of them, recently converted and overly zealous in their newfound fervor, try to persuade themselves and others that they are the true custodians of the Master's ultimate confidences and the transmitters of his most intimate thoughts. Needless to say, they all claim a deep knowledge of the Archeometer, though the precise description of it, which we received from its very inventor, remains wholly unpublished. So here is the guys who actually finished the book, because like you saw, he died before actually finishing it. They're making the foreword and they're letting clear that they were the first to actually publish it, even though in the time there were people saying they had it and so on. Some do not hesitate to give a Kabbalistic and see the difference in graphy. We don't have the K here, we don't have the double B, and so on. This is not the one I use, but pay attention because that's important. Some do not hesitate to give Kabbalistic interpretations to this interpretive instrument. Others unashamedly asserting that they thoroughly know all the secrets of the archimetric science, promise magnificent and illusory initiations, which by God's grace will never come to pass, except in their own feverish imaginations. Still others invoke Saint-Yves to present their readers with ramblings of a most rudimentary and infantile anti-clericalism and anti-papal sentiment, fitting perhaps for a sub-electoral committee in a small town or a 10th grade lodge of the Great Order, which, if the master were alive, would have earned them one of his scathing rebukes that he kept quietly at hand. Some readers who sincerely admire Saint-Yves wonder why his friends appear to do so little to defend his memory. The explanation is simple. A being such as he, whose absence is forever felt, needs no defense. Even after his departure from this earth, he is powerful enough to defend himself, leaving behind enough unpublished work to silence all impostors. This work is a splendid example thereof. It comes to light at exactly the time chosen by the Master itself, answering like thunder all the mad calumnies spread after his death under the guise of his name. A complement and conclusion to the missions, this book is a true introduction to the study of the Archeometer. Never before, in any of his previous works, had Saint-Yves delved so far into revealing the foundation of his inner thought. Never had he explored the mysteries so boldly. Never had he revealed himself so fully. We will not see him solely as the Christian renovator inspired by synarchy. We will see him as the true successor of the ancient Nabis, which we have here, chief or king in Sanskrit. The last prophet, an awe-inspiring fire runs through his work as this modern Isaiah, as severe with today's scribes and the Pharisees as the son of Amos was with the scholars and priests of Judah. His visions of the future of France and Europe, now fallen into the worst pagan anarchy, are frightening. Many of these visions, sadly, have already come to pass, and others are in the process of unfolding. Had we not heard them read by the Master himself more than 7 years ago, by the infinite sea that lent them even more scope and majesty. We would think that they were written only yesterday. Here you can see that, again, nothing new under the sun. It's always cyclical. The guys were complaining about the state of Europe fucking 100 years ago, and people are going to keep complaining because it's all a cycle, the same cycle over and over. Yet, as he describes the looming cataclysms for people subject to the implacable laws of historical cycles, his heart bleeds at this inevitability that might still be avoided. He exhorts his human brothers to abandon the false road and follow the true path, one he had pointed to for more than 20 years and still indicates. He implores them to attempt it in good faith, for only those means can oppose destiny and save humanity. And herein lies his authentic humanity. Nothing human is foreign to him, which is far from the least of his titles to our veneration and profound esteem. Composed around 1903, or so it seems from certain allusions to events of that time, this work, now published, consists of scattered notes and complete texts that were devoutly gathered. We have acted solely as coordinators. We mention this so that the reader understands our need to include in the appendix a fragment written in a style quite different from the rest of the work. Should we choose to publish it despite its unfinished nature, it is because we are sure that those who knew and studied the master, however briefly, will be delighted to read it. They will recognize the master's subtle irony, the ingenious spirit, that marvelous blend of simplicity and elegance that brought such charm, originality, and at times unpredictability into his loftiest and most serious conversations. We will not discuss the book's structures and divisions here, as we believe they are sufficiently clear, especially now that a few plates of the Archeometer have been reproduced and circulated widely. Friends of Saint-Yves. So, that was it for today. It was quite long. I'm thinking about doing at least 10 pages or so every video. Since I also make some comments here and there, it should take at least 30 minutes every video. So this one is a bit longer because there was quite a few stuff here to talk about, and I did some comments as well. But that's the idea. Again, if you want, this is open source. You can help me out translating it, sharing with people, liking this, letting me know if the format is good or not, if you prefer another thing or not, and so on. That's the idea. Glad you stayed until the end, and I hope to see you next. Bye bye.